Welcome to part 3 of this Blender tutorial series where we're creating this slice of pizza. So this is where we left off in part 2. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, then definitely check that out. I will have a link in the description to the tutorial playlist. So in this part, we are going to be creating the pepperoni slices and the olives. We'll be adding the materials to the pepperoni and the olives, and those will be procedural materials, and then we'll be adding them onto the pizza. And as I mentioned in the other parts, if you'd like to help support me and this channel, then you can purchase the tutorial files from my Gumroad store and my Patreon. I will have the links in the description. So I'm going to start off by holding down the Shift and S button, and then I'm going to move my mouse to the cursor to world origin and let go. That is going to place the 3D cursor right there in the center, and that way I can press Shift A and I can add objects and they'll be added in the very center of the scene. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go here to mesh, and then I'm going to add a circle. I'll press G to grab, and let's bring this up on the Z-axis, and then I can press S to scale, and we will scale that down. Then I can press the period on the numpad to zoom into it. So I'm starting by modeling the pepperoni slice. So I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and then I'm going to press the F key, and that is going to fill a face. So now I want to hop right over here to the modifiers panel, and let's click on add modifier, and we want to give it some thickness, so let's add the solidify modifier. Alright, so we've added the solidify. You can see there's a little bit of thickness. I'm going to hold down the shift key and then drag this to make it thicker. Now I also want to scale this down so that it's the size of the pepperoni. So I'm going to press the 7 on the numpad to go to top view, and I can press S to scale, and we're going to scale this down. Because depending on how big this is, that's going to change how big I want the thickness to be of the slice. So I'll press 7 on the numpad for top view. I'm going to zoom out here so I can see the entire thing, and I'm going to scale this actually up a little bit more. So I think something like that is pretty good. That's a pretty good size for the pepperoni. All right, so I'm going to zoom in here and then take a look at that thickness. So I want to bring the thickness up just a little. So I'm going to change the thickness value to a 0.06. I think that looks pretty good. Now I also want to give this a subdivision surface modifier to smooth it out. So let's tab to go back to object mode, and then I can press Ctrl 2, and that's going to add a subdivision surface. Now you can see it's kind of stretching the faces, and that's because I need to press tab to go to edit mode, and I need to inset this face so that it has more geometry. So press A a couple of times to make sure everything's selected, and I can press the I key, and the I key is going to inset a face inside that face, and I'm just going to scale it down just a little bit and then click to place that. So now that is much more sharp. So I'm now going to press I again, and that's going to inset another face, and I'm going to bring this down a little bit more, and then I can press G and Z, G to grab, bring it down on the Z axis, and I'm just going to bring it down just a little bit, so it's just kind of coming up on the edges. Then I can press I again to inset that again, bring it down and click to place that. Then I can press G to grab and bring it on the Z axis and just bring it down a little bit. And then I can press Tab to go back to object mode, and then using the object context menu, I will shade the object smooth. So I can now press G to grab. Let's bring this down on the Z axis, kind of bring it down there, just right on top of the pizza. And I think I'll scale the whole thing down just a little bit. All right, so this is a good size for the pepperoni. So I'm now going to press Ctrl A, and then I want to click on scale to apply the scale. And that way, that is the object's new default scale. And why I'm doing that is so that the scale will be more correct when I'm adding the procedural texture. Now also when we did that, it made it a little bit thicker. So I'm actually going to hold down the shift key and drag this thickness value and just make it a little bit less thick because that's a little bit too thick. All right, that is pretty good. So now let's click right over here on the materials, and I'm going to click on new to add a new material, and I can just rename this to pepperoni. All right, now if I scroll down right here, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but because the other materials have just like a basic color to them, just to make the viewport look a little bit nicer, I'm going to take the viewport display and I'm going to make this a bright red color and then just make it a little bit darker, just so that it looks kind of nice in the viewport. All right, so select this object. We're going to go over to the shading tab so we can create the procedural material for the pepperoni. So let's zoom in here, and I'm in the camera view. So I'm going to press Ctrl B, and I'm just going to drag a box around this. That way it's going to add the camera boundary, and that way it'll only render what the camera can see right there in that boundary. And so the viewport rendering will be faster. All right, so let's now create the procedural material for this pepperoni. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the Voronoi texture. Let's drop the Voronoi texture right here. Now, in the previous part of this tutorial, I turned on the Node Wrangler add-on in the user preferences. So because the Node Wrangler add-on is turned on, I can press Ctrl T with the Voronoi selected, and that's going to add the texture coordinate mapping. Now, I don't need the mapping, so I can just press X to delete it, and then let's take the object, and we're going to plug that up to the vector to use the object coordinates. And then I'm also going to hold down the Control and Shift key and select the Voronoi texture, and that is going to preview it. So let's turn the scale up quite a bit to like a 15. And then I also want to click right here on the F1, and I'm going to change this to distance to edge. And that is going to kind of give it that pepperoni texture with those little cracks in there. Now I want this texture to be more noisy, so I'm actually going to add a noise texture in here to distort the Voronoi. I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search. I'm going to search for a noise texture. Let's click on the noise texture, and I can drop it right in here between the texture coordinate and the Voronoi. So now I'm going to play around with some of the settings. So on the scale here, I'm going to turn this up to like a 10. And then also I'm going to take the detail and I'm going to turn that all the way up to the max, which is 15. Now that is very distorted, and I don't want it to be that distorted. I just want it to be distorted a little bit. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for a mix RGB. Let's click on the mix RGB, and I'm going to drop it right here. So then I'm going to bring the noise texture down, and I want to put the noise texture into color 2, and then I want to take the object coordinates and we're going to put that into color 1. And actually I don't want to use the color, so let's unplug this. I want to plug the factor into color 2 from the noise texture, and then the object from the texture coordinate into color 1. And then I want to click right here on this mix, and I'm going to use add instead, so let's change this to add. Now if I drag the factor all the way up to 1, it's going to be distorting it a lot, but then if I drag this all the way down to 0, it's not going to be distorting it at all. So I just want it to be distorting it a little bit just to give it a little bit of noise. So I'm going to change this factor value to like a 0.15. So I 0.15, and now you can see it's just being distorted a little bit. Now I also want to mix this final texture in with just a little bit of noise. So let's actually click on this Voronoi texture, and then I can press Ctrl 0, and that is going to add a mix RGB. So I can just click on this to open up the mix RGB, and let's drag this over here. So now I want to take this noise texture, and I'm going to drag the factor into color 2, just so that we can mix the noise texture in with the Voronoi to give it some more noise. And then this Voronoi texture, the distance is going to be going into color 1. And then I'm going to click on the factor value, and I'm going to change this to a 0.55. So now you can see that has a bunch more noise in there. Now this is not the color of pepperoni, so let's change the colors. So I'm going to press Shift A, I'm going to click on the search, and I can search for a color ramp, and let's put the color ramp right here after the mix. So we can now just change these colors to make like the red pepperoni. So this first color right here, I'm going to keep as black. Then I'm going to click on the white tab, and I'm going to make this a bright red color, so a very bright red color. Although I will turn the brightness down a little bit so it's not crazy bright. And if you want to use the exact same color that I'm using for this red color for the pepperoni, you can go over to the hex value and you can put in a hex value of A6 1B00. Now I also want to add a little bit more color variation, so I'm going to hold down the Control key and then click right there, and that's going to add a new tab right there in the center. And then this color, I just want to make it a little bit darker. And the hex value that I'll be using for this color is 781600. So now you can see the color is much more like a piece of pepperoni. So let's now take the color, and we're going to put that into the base color, and then I can Control Shift and select the principled to preview that. Now I also want to give it a little bit of subsurf because it is meat, so I do want to let a little bit of light through. So I'm going to turn this subsurface just up to like a 0.1, so there's just a little bit of subsurface. Now on this subsurface color right here, I want to make this a red color and then make it a little bit darker. And for this subsurface color, the hex value is going to be A70200. And then I do want this meat to look very cooked and oily and shiny. So let's take this roughness value, and I'm going to turn this to like a 0.25 so it is more shiny and it looks more wet. All right, now I also want to give this some bump because it's very smooth right now. So let's first take this mix right here, this second mix. We're going to plug the color into the normal to give it some bump. And then we need to convert this to normal data. So let's press Shift A. I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to search for the bump node, and let's drop the bump node right here between the mix and the normal. Now to convert the color data into normal data, we can plug this into the height value instead, and now that is looking nice and bumpy. Now it is pretty strong right now, so let's turn the strength down to just like a 0.1 so it's much less bumpy. And then I also want to put this noise texture into the bump just to make it a little bit noisy. So let's click on this bump node right here. I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and we're just going to drop it here. So then to convert this noise texture into normal data, we can plug the factor right here into the height value of the bump, and then that's going to convert it to normal data. So then it's normal data. So then the normal can go into the normal, and that way we can mix multiple bump maps together. So I can Control Shift and select this one. You can see that's what it's looking like. And then I can Control Shift and select this one. You can see there's some more bump, and then I can Control Shift and select the principled BSDF, and you can see we now have a nice bumpy slice of pepperoni. So the procedural material is done. So I'm going to hop back over here to the layout, and then I'm going to press the period on the numpad to zoom into it. So I now just want to duplicate the pepperoni and put it all over the pizza. So I'm going to press the tab key, and that will take me into edit mode. And then I'm going to press the O key, or you can also click right here, and that is going to turn on the proportional editing. Now why I'm doing this is because I want to select some of the pepperoni, and then I want to press G to grab, and then I need to scroll with my mouse wheel, and if I scroll with my mouse wheel, that is going to change the size of the proportional editing. So anything that is in the circle, that's going to be pulled along with it. So you can select a vertex, press G to grab, and I just want to make each slice of pepperoni a slightly different shape just to make it look more random and natural. And then also the cheese is kind of bumpy. You can see the cheese kind of comes up here. So I'm just going to select some pieces, select some of these vertices, and press G to grab. And I'm just going to lay these on top of the cheese because the cheese is kind of bumpy and random. You can see right here, I need to select a vertex, press G to grab, and kind of bring it up. All right, so just tab back into object mode. So there is the first slice of pepperoni. So I want to keep doing this for the other slices. So I'm going to press 7 on the numpad to go to top view. I'm now going to press Shift D to duplicate. I'm going to duplicate this object, just bring it over here. And then I want to give it a random rotation just to make it look more random. So I'll press R to rotate, just kind of give it a random rotation. And then I can press tab to go into edit mode. So then I can select some pieces, press G to grab, just select some of the vertices and press G to grab and just kind of pull them up and just kind of place them on the cheese. And again, just kind of play around with the shape, just give each slice of pepperoni a little bit of a different random shape, and it'll just make it look quite a bit nicer. All right, so something like that, just kind of go around and make sure it's nicely placed on the cheese. So I'm going to tab to go back to object mode. Let's press the 7 on the numpad to go to top view, and I want to put another piece of pepperoni kind of here, over here. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. Let's bring it over here, and I want to stick it right in there so it's kind of going into the sauce, and then I can press G to grab. Let's bring this up on the Z-axis, and I want to stick it there. So then I can press tab to go into edit mode. And I'm just going to bring this down. You can use your scroll wheel to change the size of the proportional editing and just kind of play around with the shape of that to fit it so that it's just placed right on the cheese. And this is almost like if the slice of pepperoni was kind of cut in half and then it was just kind of stuck there on the end or something. All right, so just bring that over, tab back into object mode. That's looking pretty good. Let's press 7 on the numpad again for top view. I'm going to select this one again. Let's press Shift D to duplicate. Bring this over here, tab into edit mode again, and I'm going to do the same thing. So select a vertex, press G to grab, and we're just going to move this around and kind of give it a random shape as well. So maybe this one could be a little bit bigger, so you kind of stretch it out a little bit. You could give this a random rotation if you need to. And then of course, go along on the edges, just select a vertex, press a G to grab, and just kind of play around with the shape of that and make it so it's just on top of the cheese. Because we don't really want it to be floating, we just want them to be resting on the cheese. All right, so I can press the 7 on the numpad again to go to top view. Let's press Control S again to save, and then I can press Shift D again to duplicate. Let's put this one here, and I'm going to press R to rotate and just give it a random rotation. Now, I thought it would be cool if this piece of pepperoni is almost like falling down on the side of the piece of pizza. So I'm going to bring this down, press G to grab, bring it down, and then I can press Tab to go into edit mode. So this piece of pepperoni is going to be kind of sliding down the side. So to do this, I'm going to select this vertex, and I can press R to rotate and G to grab, and select another vertex, R to rotate, G to grab, and we're just going to make this piece, so it's kind of going down. You could also hold down the shift key and select multiple vertices if you want to select a bigger part. So I'm just holding down the shift key, selecting some of these vertices, and then you can rotate them and just kind of bring them down. So it's kind of like if the piece of pizza was cut from the entire pizza and then this piece just kind of slid down on the side. I think it just adds a nice touch to the pizza. So now I'm just bringing this up, just kind of fitting it on the cheese there, bring that up as well. Something like that is pretty good. I'll press the 7 on the numpad again to go to top view, and I'm just going to zoom out, and I'm going to select this one right here, and let's press Shift D to duplicate, bring this one here, and then kind of give it a random rotation. And then let's bring it down on the Z-axis, just kind of bring it down there. And then I can press tab to go into edit mode, and I can just kind of bring this up and just kind of place that there on the cheese. And then sometimes it seems like if pepperoni has been cooked really well, it almost like curls up a little bit. So I'm gonna do that on this piece. So I'm gonna select a vertex, press R to rotate and G to grab, and I'm just gonna have it curled up a little bit, kind of like it got really fried and it was really hot. So it kind of like curled, kind of shriveled a little bit. So I'm gonna just do that. I'm just gonna have the pepperoni slice coming up a little bit on each side, and that'll just give a nice touch, make it look a little bit different than the other pieces. So something like that, just kind of have it coming up on the side there. And I need to bring this up as well. All right, just take a look at this, look at it from different angles, make sure it looks good all around. All right, tab back into object mode. Let's press 7 on the numpad for top view, and I'm going to select this one again. Let's press Shift D to duplicate it, and then I can press R to rotate and give it a random rotation. Now this one, I want to actually cut it in half and have it kind of on the edge, as if like when they used the pizza cutter and cut the piece of pizza, it was cut right through the piece of pepperoni. So I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode. I can hold down the Z button, go into wireframe and let go, and I just want to select half of the pepperoni. So I'm going to press A to deselect everything. I can press B for the box select, and I'm just going to box select half of the pepperoni, press B for the box select, and box select anything else if you didn't get it, and then hold down the Z button, go back into the solid view. So that is good. Let's press X to delete, and then we want to delete the vertices. All right, so now we need to fill a face there in the center. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and then select right there. So hold down the Alt key and just select that loop, and that is going to select the entire loop. And then I can press the F key, and that is going to fill a face. Now you can see that there's a weird issue there, like it kind of is like sloping down on the side, like it's really smooth, and I want it to be more sharp. And there's also a weird issue right there where it kind of goes in. So what I'm going to do is tab to go into edit mode, and then I can press Control R to add a loop cut, and let's left click and then right click to place a loop cut there. Then I can press Control R as here as well, and I'm going to left click and right click so it's in the center. Then I'm going to press the K button, and the K button is going to take us to the knife tool. So we can actually cut a face through this face. So I'm going to click on this vertex right here from the loop cut that we just made. I'm going to click and then bring the knife tool over and then click right there. And then I'm going to hit the enter button. And so that is going to cut a loop cut right there in that face. So then I can hold down the Alt key and just select right here. And that is going to select that entire loop that we made. And I want to push it up close so that it's not as smooth on the edge there. So I'm going to double tap the G key, and double tapping the G key is going to activate the edge slide. So I can slide this part over just like that, and then click to place that. And then I can press tab to go back to object mode. So now it looks like the pepperoni slice has been sliced in half. So I'm going to press R to rotate and G to grab, and I'm just going to bring this pretty close, bring it pretty close up to the pizza slice, kind of up to the edge there. Then I can press tab to go to edit mode, and again we can do the same thing. So you can just select a vertex, press G to grab, and we're just going to play around with the shape of the pepperoni. All right, so just fixing that shape there, just kind of making it random and different, maybe rotating this down a little bit so it looks like the piece is kind of going down a little bit, kind of falling down with the cheese, something like that. Go back into object mode. That is looking really good. So let's press 7 on the numpad again to go to the top view. All right, so I want to add 3 more. So I want to add one here, and then one here, and then one more kind of at the end. So let's select this one. I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and this one we're going to put about here. I could also scale this one down a little bit just to change the shape and make it just a little bit different. So this one will be just slightly smaller. I can tab to go into edit mode, and then I can just press G to grab, and remember, scroll with your mouse wheel to change the size of the proportional editing. And we're just going to place that right there on the pizza slice. Just kind of making it a bit random. Let's press tab to go back into object mode. I'll press shift D to duplicate. Let's bring this down here and just kind of rotate this one over. I need to kind of rotate it because the pizza slice is coming down. Put this right about there. I'll tab into edit mode and then again just do the same thing. So select some random vertices here and there and press G to grab and just kind of bring this around. You could even have it curl up a little bit like this one here if you wanted to do that a few more times on some of these. All right, that is good. Let's tab to go back to object mode and we just need one more. I'm going to have one more down here. I think I'll actually bring this one up a little bit. Maybe rotate it over a little bit so that we have a little bit more space. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate and R to rotate, G to grab. And I want this one to be kind of falling down just like we did with this one. So I want this one to just be kind of falling down a little bit. So I'm going to double tap the R key, and the double tapping the R key is going to activate the trackball rotation. And I can just kind of rotate that around and then just rotate it over. Let's tab to go into edit mode and I can select a vertex. I'll press R to rotate and G to grab. We're just going to bring this down so it looks like it is maybe sliding off the side of the pizza just a little bit. All right, and then select some parts here, G to grab. And we're just going to put this down here, bring this one down, stick it into the cheese. All right, that's pretty good. All right, that's pretty good. So press Control S to save. I'm going to press the 0 on the numpad to go into the camera view. And then in the camera's view, I'm going to press Control B and I'm going to drag a box around this. And then I can hold down the Z button and go up into the rendered view to see how that's looking. All right, there we go. So we now have those pepperoni slices, and that is looking quite tasty. So I'm now going to be creating the olives. So I'm going to hold down the Z button, go back into solid view, and I'll press Control S to save. And then I can press Shift S, hold down the Shift S button. I'm going to move my mouse to cursor to world origin and let go, and that is going to bring the cursor into the center there. And then I'm going to press Shift A, and to create the olives, we are going to be adding a torus. So let's add a torus and then zoom in here. And then right behind me, if you click on the add a torus settings, right when you add the torus, don't move it or scale it or anything. Just open up the add torus settings right behind me right there. And that was going to open up some settings. So on the major segments, I'm going to change this to 32. And you can see now it's lower poly. And on the minor segments, I'm going to be changing this to 9. All right, there we go. So I can now just click on this button to minimize this. Let's press Control S again to save. So I can press G to grab. Let's bring this up on the Z axis. So hit Z, bring that up, and then I can press S, and we're going to scale this quite a bit smaller because this is going to be a little slice of an olive. So I'm now going to press the tab key to go into edit mode, and we still have the proportional editing turned on. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select a loop right here, the loop inside there, and then I'll press S to scale, and then I need to scroll with my mouse wheel to make the proportional editing much smaller, and I just want to bring that in a little bit and kind of have that pull along with it. So basically I'm trying to make this inner area just a little bit sharp. And then I also want to make the top sharp. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select this loop of vertices. I can press G to grab. I can hit Z to bring it up on the Z axis and then scroll with your mouse wheel. And I just want some of it to come up with it. And then I can press S to scale and we can scale that down a little bit. All right, and then I also want to hold down the Alt key and select this loop of vertices. I can press S to scale, and again, scroll your mouse wheel, maybe make it a little bit smaller. I can also press G and Z, and we're going to bring that up. So I kind of want this to be a little bit sharp, and this to be a little bit sharp on the top. So I'm going to tab to go back into object mode, and then I want to press Control 2. And Control 2 is going to add a subdivision surface modifier, and then using the object context menu, I can shade that smooth. So you can kind of see up here, that's a little bit sharper, and on the edge out here, it's sharper. Now I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I want to make this even sharper. So I'm going to press Control R, and Control R will add a loop cut. I can just left click and then bring this down, and then left click again to place that. And then I can press Control R, left click, bring that in a little bit, and then left click again. And then I can press tab to go back to object mode. And I'm just going to take a look at this on object mode. So that's pretty good, but I do want to make it longer. So I'm going to tab back into edit mode, and I'm going to press the A key a few times to select select everything. So I can now press S to scale, and I want to scale this up on the Z-axis and just make everything a little bit thicker, and then just place that there. All right, that is looking pretty good for our olive. Of course, we will change the shape and make it a bit random, but that is a pretty good shape. So this is just like a little slice of an olive. So now let's add a new material. So I can click on new here to make a new material, and I can just call this olive. And then because we've done this with all the other objects, I will just change the viewport color just because it looks pretty nice in the viewport. So in the viewport display here, I'm going to take this color and I'm going to make it very, very dark. But not fully dark, because then it's basically shadeless, so just kind of a dark gray color. So now I want to scale this down to its proper size. So I'm going to press 7 on the numpad for top view, and I want to scale this down a little bit more so it's kind of half the size of the pepperoni, or maybe a little bit smaller, something like that. And I can also bring it down on the Z-axis to about that size. All right, so I now want to press Control A, and I want to apply the scale, and that way the size of the procedural texture will be consistent. So now let's click right over here on the shading tab, and I can zoom in here. Let's also press Control B in the 3D space or in the camera view and just drag a box around there just so that the preview is going to render faster. All right, so we can now create the procedural olive material. So this material is going to be really simple. So for the base color of this olive, I'm going to make this fully black. If you wanted to, you could make this like a green olive and kind of make it like a brighter color, kind of like a greenish tannish, something like that, but make it kind of darker. You could do that if you wanted to, but I want to do a black olive because I want it to look pretty classic. So I'm going to make the base color fully black. Now I do want a little bit of light to be going through, but it's going to be very, very subtle. So on the subsurface scattering, I want to change this to a 0.03. And that way it's just going to allow a little bit of light to come through. Now you can see that pretty strong, and that's because the subsurface color is white. So let's click on the subsurface color, and I want to make this an orangey color, but then I want to make it very, very dark. So it's going to be a very, very dark brown on the subsurface. And if you want to use the same exact color that I'm using on the hex value, you can punch in 310D00. So that is the color that I'll be using for the subsurface scattering. Now I want to add just a tiny bit of bump on this olive. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search again for a noise texture, and let's drop it down here. And then with the noise texture selected, I can press Control T, and that is going to add the texture coordinate and mapping, but I don't need the mapping, so I can select the mapping, and I'm going to press X to delete it. And then let's take the object, and we're going to put that into the vector. And I'm going to bring the texture coordinate over right here. And then I will Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it. So I want to turn the scale to just like a 3, and then I also want to turn up the detail quite a bit. So I'm going to turn the detail all the way to the max, which is 15. So then I want to take the factor, and I'm going to put this into the normal to give it some bump. And then to convert this to normal data, let's press Shift A, and I'm going to go here and add a bump node. Let's click on the bump node, and I'm just going to drop it right in here. And then we actually want the factor to be going into the height value to convert it to normal data. And then I can Control Shift and select it to preview it. Now olives are pretty smooth. They just have a tiny little bit of bump, but they're pretty smooth. So I'm going to turn the strength way down to just like a 0.15. Just like a 0.15, so it's very subtle. And then I can Control Shift and select the principled BSDF. So there we go. We now have a procedural olive material. Let's press Control S again to save the file, and then we can go right back over here to the layout. So I can now just place the olives around. So I'm going to press the 7 on the numpad to go to top view. I'm also going to bring this in a little bit so we have a bit more space. And I'm going to press G to grab. And let's bring this olive right over here. And then I can press G and Z, and we're going to bring this down and just kind of place it in the cheese. Now I want the olive to look much more random because right now it's perfectly circular. So I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and we still have the proportional editing turned on. So I can now just select a vertex, press G to grab, scroll with my mouse wheel, and I'm just going to make each olive kind of a random shape just to make it a bit more organic and natural. And also because it's been cooked on the pizza, the shape is going to change a little bit. If it's gotten pretty dry, it might shrivel a little bit. So just kind of changing that shape. So something like that, I can press Tab to go back into object mode. And actually this is a little bit high, so I'm going to bring this part down. All right, so go back to object mode, and then I can press 7 on the numpad for top view. So I'm now going to press Shift D to duplicate. Let's bring one over here. I can kind of give it a random rotation, and then I can kind of rotate it. And let's make this one so it's kind of sagging on the side. So I'll press Tab to go into edit mode, and then I can select a vertex here on the edge. I can press R to rotate and G to grab. And let's just bring that down a little bit so it's kind of sagging. And then just select some vertices and press G to grab and just make the shape a bit random. So something like that. All right, that is pretty good. So I'll press Tab to go to object mode. Let's press 7 on the numpad for top view. And I want to put another olive here. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate. And actually, I don't want to duplicate this olive because this olive is kind of sagging down. So I'll press X to delete. We can delete that. Let's use this one instead. So I'm going to select this olive. I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and let's stick this here. Then I can press the period on the numpad to zoom into it, and let's press G and Z, and we're going to bring this up. All right, tab into edit mode, and then I can do the same thing. So just kind of select some points, just kind of make it a little bit random, make some parts a little bit higher and some a bit lower, make some parts a little bit thicker and some parts a bit thinner. Just kind of play around with the shape and make it a bit random. All right, so I can press 7 on the numpad for top view. Let's zoom out here. I'll press Shift D to duplicate. Let's stick one here, and this one is gonna kind of be sticking into the sauce. So I'll press G to grab, just kind of bring it up, and press R to rotate and rotate it over a little bit. And then I can tab to go into edit mode. And again, we're just gonna select a vertex, press G to grab, and just kind of play around with the shape, maybe stick this one in there a little bit. You can also bring it down, make it look like maybe the olive was cut a little bit, kind of cut in half. Tab to go back to object mode. That is looking pretty good. Maybe just bring this down a little bit. All right, that's good. Let's press 7 on the numpad again for top view. And then I'm going to select this olive again. I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and let's bring this one here. Now this one I thought would be kind of cool if we had it just coming out of the cheese a little bit. So I'll press G to grab, bring this up, and then I can press R to rotate and kind of rotate that over on the side. And then I can press Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to select a vertex, press G to grab, and I'm just going to stick this right in there, and also rotate this and bring it down. So this olive is kind of going to be sagging into the cheese. Maybe it was kind of cut in half, or maybe it's like melting into the cheese. I thought it would just look kind of cool, just to give it a little bit of variation. So something like that is pretty good. Maybe actually tab into edit mode and bring it down even more. So kind of make it a bit more sharp as it kind of curves down into the cheese. Something like that. All right, 7 on the numpad for top view. So I think I just want to add 2 more, maybe one over here and then another one down here. So I'll select this piece. I'll press Shift D to duplicate it, stick it here. I can navigate over to it and press G to grab and just kind of stick it on the cheese, and then press R to rotate. And we're just going to rotate this down there and kind of stick it in the cheese. And then again, tab into edit mode, and I can press G to grab and just kind of give it a random shape. So something like that is pretty good. All right, tab back into object mode. Let's press 7 on the numpad for top view. I'm going to zoom out, and I want to do one more kind of over here. So I'm going to select this olive. Let's press Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to bring this here. I can press G and Z to bring that up, and then just kind of give it a random rotation. Rotate it around on the Z axis, and then tab to go into edit mode. And you can just select a vertex and press G to grab and just play around with the shape of that. So we're just navigating around and making some parts a little bit higher, some parts a little bit smaller. All right, tab back into object mode, and that is looking really nice. So we now just have a few olives here and there. So I'm going to press the 0 on the numpad to go back into the camera view. I'm going to press Control B in the camera, and then I'm going to drag a box around the camera. That's going to add the camera boundary, so it'll only render what the camera can see. And then I can hold down the Z button, and let's go up into the rendered view so I can preview how that's looking. And there we go. So we now have some little olives on the pizza. Now, one thing that I want to do is actually make the light a little bit less bright, just because it's a little bit bright. So I'm going to select the light, and then on the strength here, I could just maybe turn this down to maybe just like 180. That looks a little bit better. I do think that light was a little bit too bright. Let me try like 150. That might be a little bit too dark. I think I like the 180. something like that. I don't want it to be too blown out, but there we go. So there we have it. So this is going to wrap it up for part 3 of the tutorial series. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've been enjoying this so far, and I hope you've created a really nice slice of pizza. Now we're not done yet because there is still one more part. So in the last part, in part 4, we are going to be creating the onions, and we're also going to be creating the pineapple, and we will be creating the little pieces of basil. So we'll be putting those around. We will render out the final image and then do some compositing to get a really nice finished render. So when part 4 is released, it'll be right up there on the end screen and the link in the video description. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the last part, part 4.